Hi, this is Paul Bain. I'm with New Hope Community Church in Brentwood, Tennessee. I've been a senior pastor for nearly 37 years now, 27 at New Hope. I turned 61 this year. I'm in the latter years of my life. The reality is that in this stage, I don't have a lot of years left, even though they may be my most productive. The curse is in the church today that if you really want a younger church, you must also find a person who can relate to younger people. I don't care how many times that I think that I'm a young man. When I look in the mirror, I understand that I'm no longer a young man. And one of the things that we understand about church dynamics, and generally the demographics of a church, will grow with the age of the pastor. So now I'm in a congregation where I have people who were in their 50s and 60s when I began are now in their 80s. So we're in a transition period where a year and a half ago I started the process to be able to get a younger man who had been on staff for 7 years to come in and be the senior pastor. It was kind of a threatening situation as far as when you're the head guy, when you have been the vision caster, when you've been the one who has been, quote, in control. Somewhat difficult to give up control. But I realized, and I was in a very fortunate circumstance because I had a dynamic young man who had come as our youth pastor at 29 years of age, and he was now 36 years old, had done our next gen, our young families, and was was greatly talented. And so anyway, I realized, and we put him through a process, actually put him through seminary and did a lot of things with him, grooming him if he desired to become the senior pastor. So a year and a half ago, my associate, Clay Harlan, who had been in business before and as an associate pastor looked at me, and really kind of my right-hand guy, and also understood the business practices of life. He looked at me and he says, "We have a young horse. We have a young horse. Are you ready to ride him?" And I thought to myself, no, not really. I'm still just 60 years old at this point, and I'm thinking at least another 4 or 5 years in the senior role position, if not a little bit longer. And he said, "Well, if we don't do something, we're probably going to lose him." And I said, "You're right." And so he said, "What do you think this will look like?" And I thought about all the ways that that would keep me in control. I could bring him on as a co-pastor, and I would continue to have the control, which is generally what happens in most churches. But Clay looked at me and he said, "Are you ready to ride the horse?" He said, "He's your son's age. You trust him." Barbara Mandrell had told me when he was, after a year at the church, that he said, "Josh gives you the respect you're due." So he was literally a David and had been so loyal and done such a wonderful job. And you have to understand, when it comes to transition, you've got to find the right person, the person who's not trying to take your job away, who can come in and that also you can possibly work with. So Clay also said to me, he said, "Are you going to let him run? Are you going to let him run things, or are you going to turn it loose?" And I thought to myself, I didn't understand what he meant. He said, "My father and my uncles would always want me to run a business. And so when I got ready to go run the business, or before I ran their business that they wanted me to run," he said, "I looked at them and I asked them one question: are you going to let me run it? Or are you going to be involved and try to tell me what to do?" And so at that moment, I somewhat had a prophetic voice that said, "Okay, if you're going to turn it loose, you need to totally turn it loose." So we engaged Charles McGowan, Dr. McGowan, with the idea of making a transition, an elder-led church with a congregational vote. So we set up a procedure that we would take a year's time, and we would present to the congregation that Pastor Josh would become the senior pastor after a year. I would remain as the senior pastor all through that period, but he would run all the meetings, do all the preaching, or at least have the rotation and take control of that. And so in that regard, it was an amazing year's time as we started that process a year and a half ago in June. And so one of the two premises that had to take place, first of all, I had to be able to turn loose and let go. After 37 years of ministry, being the guy who's always in control and always the guy who was the boss, could I let a younger man come in, and could I literally make a decision? In fact, make a decision that I would no longer ever even preach if it need be, that I was literally letting go of the church. Now, letting go of the church in that regard was also that I was going to stay on and do ministry with the older part of the congregation and do the visitation and things that I do quite naturally in my gifting. But anyway, the other part was that Pastor Josh would have to step up to the plate. He would be evaluated by the membership, he would be evaluated by the elders, and it would come down to a vote this past June 29th, 2014, that he would be voted on or affirmed by the congregation, the membership. Well, long story short, that transition took place. He stepped up to the plate. He was able to do the preaching. He was able to run the church. He was able to do the things that needed to be done so that when that time came and we were ready to make the transition, the church almost gave a 100% positive affirmation for him to become the new senior pastor at New Hope. Now, a lot of times people would ask me, are you retiring? No, I'm not retiring. I'm just changing roles. I'm changing roles in a way that I get to do the things that I do quite naturally that I love to do in ministry. Now, the interesting part of this whole process is that it keeps a continuity to the church. One of the positives is that Pastor Josh had our DNA, our vision, and the things that we tried to accomplish, the field that we have in our congregation. He was able to continue with that and build upon that vision and create a new vision, but his vision for the future. So he brought new vitality, new gifts, new insight, new ideas and dreams. And so in that process, we let a young man come into our situation and take control. Now, I will tell you that it's tough to let go, but that's a process and a journey that's been one of the journeys of my life, to let go and let a younger man do it. And so we have seen during that period of time, when most churches, when a transition takes place or if something happens to the senior pastor, there's going to be an automatic 20% decline. And so there was no there was no great leaving of any group of people. We had a couple of younger families leave. We had a couple of the older families leave, but we kept the vast majority of all the families. And it's an amazing thing that even during the transition we were beginning to grow, and we were able to reach out to younger families as he brought new vitality to the youth. And we kept the older congregation able to make that change and be a part of what was going on. And now, after nearly 6 months as he has been in the senior role position, we've kept everyone, we're growing, we're having young families come in. And I'm really having the time of my life in regard to the fact that I'm doing the things that I always enjoyed without the pressures of having to worry about how the grass is cut, whether or not the sermon's good, whether or not anybody dislikes or likes the music, whatever it may be. But I just want to share with you that two things, but to grow a church and to take the cycle of the church in the sense of the ups and downs, that transition is so important, because transition will literally either kill your church or make it grow. And most of the time I've seen that the transitions are such that if you get the wrong person in, you'll see the church decline maybe even 50% over a couple year period. And you'll be lucky that you can even keep a situation where you may even keep the doors open. We were fortunate that we only had, we have 27 acres and about 30,000 square feet of space, and it's all paid for. It was debt free. So God is blessed, and I hope that this may be something that I would be glad to dialogue even further about this kind of transition, what it looks like, and the real possibilities of seeing a church continue to grow with new vitality by blessing the pastor who has spent his life there, the leadership that has spent their life there, but also now being able to focus to do those things and let the young vision come in with excitement and energy to grow the church in a new and dynamic way.